Welcome to Q&A practice. Let's start out with our transcript where the attorneys were making their statements, and we're actually about finished with this one, so let's finish it up and then we'll get back to our Q&A. And this is actually the court speaking now. Ready? Here we go. The situation is complicated somewhat in this case by the fact that as the court understands the testimony of the witness, we don't know precisely when the date was that the statement was alleged to have been made. In the court's opinion, this is a very close decision, as the parties recognize the recency requirement does not, in this case, necessarily mean a day or two before, but the court feels that some specifics are required, and in this case, we don't really know within the range of weeks or months exactly when the statement was made. Presumably it could have been, or when the observation was made, presumably it could have been any time from the middle of June until October 10th. I'm also concerned by the lack of context in which the decision was made, or it's a very short one-sentence description of an event or condition without any qualifiers or any solid explanation. And in the court's opinion, that makes its relevance and certainly potential for prejudice, relevance less, potential for prejudice greater. And for that reason, while the decision is admittedly a close one, the court is not going to allow the evidence in for the reasons I gave, the lack of specifics and the uncertainty as to exactly when the statement was made, and the fact that different inferences could be drawn from it because there is so little information about its background. Anything else before we bring the jury back in? No. Very well, we'll bring in the jury. Right. Now we'll get to some Q&A practice. And we will start with the court. Ready? Here we go. I'll bet it doesn't work. That's the name. All right, who wrote the report? I did. I'm going to let you spell the name from the report for us, please. The last name of the clerk is spelled. The last name is spelled K-A-R-I-L-H. First name only. K-R-I-S-T-L-E. Thank you. Thank you. That's not tough. Crystal Carl. Well, that's easy for you to say. Ms. West. When Mark got up to the counter, what happened? He placed the beer on the counter. And what happened next? I did not observe it because at that point the clerk looked over in my direction, so I put my head down as if I were looking at the stuff in front of me. I was within earshot, though. Could you hear anything? Any conversations? Yes. And what did you hear? The clerk asked Mr. White for his identification. And what did you hear or see next? I didn't hear anything other than the ringing of the register, and I looked up. The next I looked up, Mr. White was walking out of the store with his purchase. After he left the store, what did he do? I waited near the entrance to the store. When you say, I'm going to back up a second, when you say he left the store with his purchase, what did he walk out of the store with? The beer that he'd placed on the counter. I'm sorry. So then after he left the store, where did you go? I went to the entrance of the store and stood there. And why did you do that? Waiting for the other investigators outside to come in to assist. And did they in fact come in? Yes. And what did you do next? At that point I approached the clerk and identified myself using my department credentials as an investigator and told her that she had just sold alcohol to a minor, and I'm sorry, told her which minor it was. And did she say anything at that point? Yes, she did. Objection calls for hearsay. Overruled. You may answer. Yes, she did. She said that I checked his ID and it said that he was 21 in 2006, I believe. And did you respond to that? Yes, I did. What did you say or do? I told her no. I said that merely shows that his license is provisional until 2006. I said that the red strip indicates that he's not 21 until 2009, I believe. Moved to strike relevance, overruled. Did you show her the ID? I believe I did, yes. At some point, did Mark come back into the store? Yes, he did. And when he came back in the store, what happened? I had, I guess, Crystal come out from behind the counter and stand over near Mr. White, and I had Mr. White hold the beer, and I asked Mr. White who sold you the alcoholic beverage, and they were both at the time facing each other, and Mr. White pointed to Crystal, and I believe he said she did. I'm going to ask you to look at what's been marked as Exhibit 3B, the lower photograph. Do you recognize that photo? Yes, I do. And what is that? That's a photo taken, I believe, immediately after the identification, or right as the identification took place. And who's in the photo? That is Mr. White on the left of the photo, my left of the photo, and the clerk, Ms. Carl, on the right. I have no further questions at this time. Mr. Morris, thank you. Investigator Randall, did you follow the decoy outside when he exited after he left the counter area? No, I did not. What did you do? I stood near the front door watching him go outside, observing him as he walked over towards the car where the other investigators were. Okay, and at the time when you contacted the clerk and identified yourself as an investigator, were you by yourself or with anyone? Somebody was with you. I believe two other investigators were inside. Okay, do you recall how many clerks were working at that moment? I do not, sir. Okay, and what was the decoy doing at that moment? The decoy, I believe, was outside at the car. Okay, and at some point in time, he came inside and joined you. Yes, I requested that he come back inside a few moments after that so that we could do the face-to-face identification. And then you testified that you had the clerk come out from behind the counter to do the identification. Is that right? Yes, I did. How did you do that? I asked her to step outside of the counter. Okay, and where did you guys walk to do the identification? If the door of the store were directly behind me, I believe it would be immediately to my left. Let me, I guess, make it simpler for everyone and also the record. How far away from the counter did you go to make the identification? Oh, 3-4 feet maybe. Okay, and that photo, well, strike that. At the time the identification was made, what were you and the other investigators doing? Another investigator, I have no idea what the other investigator was doing. I only know what I was doing. And what was that? I think I was taking the picture and asking for the identification. Okay, and in response to the identification, did the clerk say anything? At this point, no. At this point, she had decided to remain quiet. Okay, and did she do anything in response to the identification? Nothing that I recall. Okay, do you recall how many locations you visited on this particular operation? I do not, sir. Would it refresh your recollection if you were to look at the report? If the proper attachments were there? Yes. Okay, we'll take a look at this and tell me if it refreshes your recollection. Why don't you tell us for the record what he's looking at? For the record, I'm showing the gentleman ABC form at the bottom, 338. Let me know when you're done looking at that. Yes, sir. So is your recollection refreshed? Yes. Okay. And how many places did you visit? That says 12, sir. Okay, but do you remember that? I've run a great many decoy operations since then. All I can say is, so to be truthful, looking at that report did not refresh your recollection specifically for each location. No, it did not. Except for reading what it says, you don't. Except for reading what it says. Let me finish. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Except for what it says, you don't remember. True? Specifically, no, Your Honor. Okay, forget the number of places you visited. Do you remember the number of places that this particular decoy was able to purchase alcohol on this night in question? On that document, it says 5. I do not specifically recall. Okay. There was a, may I explain? Sure. Okay. When we ran this decoy operation, the decoys were split up between two teams, and at a later time, the decoys were exchanged between two teams again, so I don't recall if that is exactly the list I did, or only half the list I did. Okay, let me ask you differently. of the locations that you visited on this particular night with this particular decoy, would it be fair to say that he was able to purchase alcohol at approximately half them? Objection: misstates the evidence, no foundation. Are you in a position to say that one way or the other? I'm entitled to his estimate if he can. I specifically do not recall how many of the locations he visited with me versus the other team. Right, but I'm not asking about the other team. I'm saying of the ones that he visited with you, is it fair to say that he was able to purchase at approximately half of them? I would say no, that's not correct. And that will conclude our Q&A practice.